Did you just take my picture? Did you just take my picture? Okay, but seriously, street photography can be intimidating and scary, especially if you're new. Some photographers are worried about how people will perceive them or if they'll get confronted or upset anybody. Here's the thing about being anxious when you're taking street photos. Yeah, it's annoying and uncomfortable, but it can actually make your photos worse. I see this all the time when I'm working with newer street photographers. They come across a scene that looks great and has potential, but they'll snap one shot and then scamper away because they're afraid of being confronted, when if they'd just waited a little bit longer for that decisive moment, and they would have had a great shot. My first ever candid is pretty rough. Yes, that's Lomo purple. It's just a dude sitting on a bench, and it's not really that interesting, but what I really hated about it when I first saw the negative, and what I still hate about it now, is how far away I am. A few years later, in the same park, I shot these. There's a big difference, right? Not much has changed, apart from the bit where I've completely cured my street photography anxiety. If you also regret ever buying Lomochrome Purple, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel so that we can hang out and talk about photography more often. I really think that getting your confidence up and killing that anxiety is one of the biggest ways to raise your game as a street photographer. But that begs the question, how? I think a lot of the advice on this is generally pretty good, but a lot of the time it's more of a band-aid and doesn't really solve the root cause. So what is the root cause? Well, in my experience, the biggest single source of that anxiety and fear for street photographers is the fear of confrontation. Now, I'm going to give you a mildly terrifying exercise to completely cure your street photography anxiety. But before we do that, I think it's really important that we bust a few myths, because a lot of photographers get this wrong. Confrontation with street photography barely ever happens. I've been shooting street for 4 or 5 years, and I've only maybe been confronted a handful of times in that time. And I shoot on a 28mm and I get close. More than that, only maybe one of these confrontations was anybody actually angry. Most of the time they're just curious and wanted to know what the hell I was doing, which is fair enough. Last of all, yes, having a prepared explanation for what you're doing, or maybe a little pocket zine with some photos that you can show people, is a good idea, and it can be helpful, but in the real world, most people have no clue what street photography is, that it's important or that it's art or even that it's legal. So saying I'm doing street photography might not always be the best approach. Sometimes it can lead people to worry that you're going to profit off of their image or exhibit it worldwide. Plus, that's very self-centric. Like, they don't care about you or your art or you as a photographer. They care about why you took their photo. So be honest, maybe they have a cool hat or you really like the way they were holding the newspaper. You don't need to give people your life story. You just need to reassure them that you're sane. Remember to smile, yeah? Okay, so what's all this about overcoming the anxiety in the first place? Buckle your seatbelt. I'm sorry, you're not gonna like this, but the facts are, it works. Every time you go out to shoot street, start out by approaching 10 complete strangers and asking to take their picture. That's right, it's street portraits. Now, please don't do the TikTok, "Hi, I'm a street photographer" thing, because again, that dialogue is really optimized for the viewer of the TikTok and not for them. Instead, it's much better to say something very simply like, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, but I think you look really cool. Would it be okay if I took your portrait?" And naturally, people are probably going to say, "What for?" Please don't say Instagram. Say the truth. I'm just practicing and I'm trying to get my confidence up. What you'll quickly realize is that asking somebody to take their photo is nowhere near as scary as the next part, where you have to now take their photo. You have to really quickly find a frame, check your exposure, figure out how to make it look good, and then get something. When you ask people for street portraits, a lot of the time they'll make a little self-conscious deflection like, "Oh, I look crap on camera," or "I'm not that interesting." And I think it's a good thing to encourage them a little bit. You could say something like, "No, I think you look great. I tell you what, I'll show you the photo afterwards, and if you don't like it, I'll delete it." Okay, we're filming the rest of this inside. But you're saying, how does this exactly help me with my anxiety when it comes to shooting candids? Here's the thing, and why this works. I think people's anxiety when it comes to shooting candids and confrontation comes from the fear of the unknown, which is normal and natural. We've had stranger danger drummed into us since we were children, and for some reason, stop, drop, and roll. And that's great for kids because they don't have any street smarts. But in the real world, despite what you see online, most people are friendly.
If I may, what are you recording?
Video for YouTube.
Okay, what's that?
I teach photography.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
nice.
People are generally pretty interested. They have a sense of humor and they're perfectly happy to chat. But you see, the act of going up to strangers and asking to take their portrait actually does two things. On the one hand, when you're going up to people and chatting with them and asking to take their portrait, it proves to you, and more importantly, I think your subconscious, that people are fine and nice and won't bite your head off. But if you ask 10 people in a row, you're bound to get some rejections too, which is also great. When you get rejected, be courteous and gracious, and it'll prove to you that even when you do get rejected, and even if they're rude about it, guess what? Nothing bad happens. Doing this before a long day of walking around the city doing street photography is a super warm-up because it kills that anxiety. It helps you switch into photographer mode, and it starts some positive momentum. Mindset is everything with street photography. You've got to be enjoying it. Now, the street portrait warm-up is great, but the real secret is, especially in big cities, nobody cares what you're doing. People are busy and they're in their own worlds, and if anyone does look at you, just smile and wave and move on. As long as you're having fun and you're feeling good about the photos you're taking and you're not doing anything wrong, which you shouldn't be, you'll have a great time. Trust me, seriously, I used to be so anxious and introverted before I started street photography. Now, I'm way more confident than I used to be. I'm extroverted. I'm way better at talking to strangers, and my photography has improved along the way. I mean, come on, I'm on YouTube. 15-year-old me could never. I'll see you next week. Hey, stay hydrated and create art.